Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. This will be my July wrap-up. Okay, so in July, I only finished 4 books. I had started more than that, did not get through them. So let's just get right into it. The first book that I finished in July was The Stranger by Albert Camus. This is part of the Game of Tomes read-along book club that they're doing. And this was paired against the Brothers Karamazov. Do I have a copy of it? I do have a copy of it. I always love a prop because I never know what to do with my hands otherwise. Okay, so The Stranger by Camus. Unlike the Brothers Karamazov, this is not a billion pages long. It also was not that great. I think I gave this like technically 3 stars. Might actually be closer to like 2.5. I didn't hate it, but especially in comparison to the Brothers Karamazov, this felt very, very lacking and very shallow. I think the comparison of characters would be, the main character of this is compared mostly probably to Ivan, the middle brother in Karamazov. So this book is about a guy. It starts out, his mother has passed away and he is going out to the nursing home to kind of take care of the final arrangements, be at the wake sort of ish thing, and then bury her and return to work. So he does that, and he is noted by the people around him as being a little bit off. He's not sad, he's not crying, he doesn't seem to be in mourning in any way. He's just sort of taking it all very matter-of-factly. And people notice that, and it kind of bothers them, but they're kind of like, well, you know, people grieve in different ways, so we can't really judge another person per se. So he goes back, he gets with a girl, he gets a girlfriend, and he becomes friends with a guy in his building. They kind of spend the summer together, and then out of nowhere, they are at the beach, and he just kind of murders someone for absolutely no reason. And then he's completely unbothered by that too. This very much, I think the point of it is that it's talking about how disconnected he is from morality and the societal definitions of right and wrong, because does anything truly matter in the end? We all have the same fate, however that fate comes about. So does anything really matter? I don't think it did a great job though making the argument. I think that's what is so phenomenal about the Brothers Karamazov is the text has the debates, it has the discussions, and each character takes a major stance in those discussions. Whereas in this book, the main character, it's sort of commentary from his perspective, but without any real in-depth discussion or look at it. So to me, this is an interesting one to compare because there's very little discussion about it, whereas the Brothers Karamazov is nothing but really a text on the discussion of that philosophy. And I didn't really care for it because it felt so lacking in that regard. I would probably be a little bit more interested in comparing The Stranger to Osamu Dazai's, I don't have it in here, Osamu Dazai's No Longer Human, because that main character also felt a severe disconnect. Now, he particularly did not feel as though he fit into society, whereas this character doesn't really care. But he fits in better than that character, but they feel very, very similar to me. I really was not super impressed with this. The character was very frustrating at times because he doesn't feel really any emotion except some sense of pleasure and self-satisfaction. But that's kind of it. And again, it wasn't a commentary on whether that is good or bad, and that should or should not be your focus in life. So it was just a little it was just a little bit of a letdown, especially considering this is considered a classic. This is considered kind of a master work on that type of philosophy, and I just didn't feel it. So yeah, 2.5 stars for The Stranger. And now I have to figure out what to do with my hands because all of these were ebooks for the rest of the month. Okay, so I read Elektra by Jennifer Saint. If you're not familiar with the story of Elektra, this is from Greek mythology. This is a retelling of Elektra, Clytemnestra, and Cassandra's stories from Greek mythology. These characters intertwined and had fully fleshed out lives and experiences through this version, whereas the Greek myths are almost predominantly focused on the male characters. You only really see their perspectives. You only really see them as real, full characters and people. So Elektra told the women's stories. Clytemnestra, her daughter is murdered as part of the sacrifice for for the Greeks to win the battle against Troy, and her dealing with what that will mean when her husband, who murdered their daughter, finally returns from the Trojan War, and it's like 10 or 15 years later. So she has had this festering hatred and need for revenge for all that time. Cassandra, am I remembering that right? It's Cassandra? Yeah, Cassandra. She was a priestess to Apollo, and Apollo basically cursed her for rebuffing him, even though it's his rules that say his priestesses cannot have sexual relations. He tries to have sex with her and she rebuffs him because, like, that's literally the rule, and then he curses her because of course he does. He's a Greek god. Basically, she can see visions of the future and no one will ever believe her. So she is trying desperately to warn the city of Troy, to warn the people. Nothing ever comes of it because everybody's like, oh, she's just crazy. She's insane. Even when her visions come true, nobody believes her. And then Elektra is the youngest daughter of Clytemnestra and Agamemnon. Oh, you want to do pizza for dinner?
Oh, hi, baby.
Right. No. Clytemnestra's husband is Menelaus. Her brother-in-law is Agamemnon, who his wife Helen was kidnapped and taken to Troy by Paris. So it was Menelaus who, his daughter was sacrificed, Iphigenia, was sacrificed to get favorable winds so the ships could actually reach the shores of Troy safely. So then Elektra is the youngest daughter of Clytemnestra and Menelaus, and she adores her father. She is absolutely enthralled by him. She sort of justifies the murder of her sister Iphigenia, and is basically like, the gods told him to. He had to obey the gods. It's not his fault. He loved her. He couldn't disobey the gods. It's not his fault. And she never forgives her mother for being just furious that her daughter was murdered or sacrificed to the gods. And so there is this huge amount of tension between Elektra and Clytemnestra, and basically Elektra is sort of doomed to repeat the cycle of violence that her house is cursed with, and it will involve her murdering.
I love you.
Her murdering somebody in her family. I wonder who it's going to be. So if you don't know, I love Greek mythology. I love Greek retellings, and I am really loving how many books are out now that are Greek tales, but from the character perspective of the women, the girls, the female characters who have been so overlooked, so demonized in the tellings, even though they play such an important role, and even though they are, like Cassandra, just victims, and they don't get agency, they don't get their own stories told, and I'm really enjoying these retellings. So for me, Elektra was a 4-star. I think partly just because I'm kind of a sucker for these female-centered Greek retellings, but I did really enjoy it. Again, I did not enjoy it as much as Circe by by Madeline Miller. So far, that is like the pinnacle of a Greek retelling that I've experienced. I would say I liked this kind of as much as The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker, which was the tale from the Trojan women's perspective during the Trojan War. I specifically Briseis, who was captured and taken to be Achilles' prize, who then Agamemnon demanded, and then Achilles pouted and refused to fight, nearly lost in the war, all of that. So I did really enjoy it. Like I said, I think 3.5 to a 4-star is kind of where my rating was, just because I'm a sucker for it. I think it was well written. I think the characters were well developed. They all felt very unique, and their reactions, their discussions felt very natural to their stories and to their situations that they were in. Oh, baby, you are shedding. Okay, what was next? What was next? Are you gonna help me or are you gonna distract me? Okay. Okay, along the lines of my Greek retelling obsession is Mythos, the Greek myths retold by Stephen Fry. This is basically just Stephen Fry reading his book, which is retelling the Greek myths from the very beginning. Like, from chaos came, the primordial beings. From the primordial beings came the Titans. From the Titans came the Olympians. And like the generic kind of like overview of the Greek pantheon, and creation stories. You're shedding so badly. I think on Goodreads I gave this a 4-star. I don't know. The more I think about it, the more I think it's maybe a little bit more like a 3-star. Like, Stephen Fry and his voice, everything phenomenal. He did a great job. He added a lot of humor and a lot of like modern, I don't know, like modern wording, modern terminology, modern humor into the stories. And in a lot of them, they were kind of flippant in the telling of them. Sarcasm was used a lot. And I don't have a problem with that. I just felt that it wasn't really well done, or at least it didn't resonate with me. These are very popular. I've never really heard anybody talk about them in a negative light. But for me, I don't know. It just sort of felt weird. It felt disconnected. The supposed dialogue that he used between characters, where it's talking about like the destruction of all mankind, and it's sort of like an eye roll and an offhanded remark ending in a pun. And I don't know. I don't really know how to describe it, but it was okay. It did a decent job, I think, covering the Greek myths and the origins of a lot of these characters and these myths that are born from them. But it just didn't hit for me. So I think really in the end it was probably closer to a 3-star experience. Because of that, I don't know if I would read his other ones. I think he has at least 2 other books about Greek mythology and retellings and stuff. And at first I was super, super excited about them. But after this one, I don't know. I don't know if I would continue on. You gonna let me kiss you? No? Okay. And then finally, I finished A Tale for the Time Being, Ruth Ozeki. This was interesting because I did not realize the play on words here. I thought it was a tale for the time being, like a tale for the moment, but things could change. For the time being, it's a tale. No, it's a tale for the time being. The time being is a being of time. Really interesting. The premise is a young girl's, like a teenager's diary, washes up on shore a year or 2 years after the tsunami that devastated Japan and other areas in the Asian Pacific area. And the woman who finds it is, I think, half Japanese. And so she is able to read most of the girl's diary. And she is following along this girl who is suicidal, but not in a depressed way, but in just a, I don't need to exist. I just have to like deal with a couple things and then it's time for me to not exist. But it plays with the concepts of the difference in time between the person writing it, the person reading it, and she's reading it, she's trying to read it as like the timeline progresses in the diary. So if she can kind of tell that the diary was like, you know, and the entries are every day for a week, she'll read one entry a day for a week. And then if she can kind of gather that the next entry wasn't written for 2 weeks, she'll hold off for 2 weeks. She's trying to like almost read it in real time in a way to really try and experience what this girl is going through, to really try to connect with this girl. And then she becomes more and more intrigued by this girl's life and her problems, her concerns, her family. And so she tries to do some research to see if she can find out in the end what happens to her, because somehow her diary ended up being swept away by the tsunami. So she doesn't know if the girl ended her life, if the girl decided to live and then the tsunami killed her, if she survived everything, and she really wants to know. All of that I thought was really well done. I really enjoyed the actual diary entries from the girl's perspective. I loved the relationship with her grandmother, who is a Buddhist nun, and the way that her grandmother will answer her in almost riddles, kind of, but also with a great sense of humor. I think the least interesting sections for me were the narrator, the woman who finds the diary, but I didn't find her unlikable or uninteresting at all. I did not know that there was going to end up being a little bit of, I don't actually know. I think it's probably magical realism. I'm not really sure on like the definitions and what falls into what category, but I want to say it kind of maybe falls into a little bit of magical realism towards the end, as you kind of learn more. I didn't hate it, but when I finished it and I was reading reviews on Goodreads, it really turned a lot of people off. So I guess I would say, I'm trying not to spoil anything. If you don't like magical realism, if you're not interested at all in not particularly scientific explanations of certain things, resolutions, a little bit of like manipulation of time and space and events being set versus being changeable, then I would steer clear of this one, because it was a really sore point for a lot of readers. They were okay up until that point, but then when they hit that, they were very just turned off. They felt like they'd wasted their time. I'm not the biggest fan of magical realism, but oddly enough, it didn't totally turn me off for the book. In a way, it kind of was, I mean, it was definitely surprising. It felt maybe a little disjointed from what I expected of the book, but I don't think it was a bad thing. I think it was done as well as it could be, because it was sort of like towards like the last quarter or third of the book where it kind of comes up. You don't really have any indication up to that point that that is where the book, you know, like that kind of a world where the book lives. But I thought it was done in an interesting way. So whether or not it's what I would have preferred, I thought it was handled fine.
I love you. I love you. I love you.
I ended up giving this one a 4-star. What was really interesting to me was reading a review from somebody who, it bothered her that the Japanese characters were voiced in the audiobook with a Japanese accent. really bothered her. She felt it was completely unnecessary, and I was gonna just take a little bit of issue with that review, and then the reviewer said that she is, I think she's Japanese American, and I'm like, okay, that's not an opinion. I guess maybe I have a right to have an opinion or voice it or anything. I will just say, from my perspective, to me it enhanced the experience. I think to me it helped define the characters between the female narrator who receives the diary washing up on the shore, the teenage girl who is living in Japan and is writing her diary, and the dialogues from all the other characters that she's interacting with, very specifically her father and her great-grandmother, actually, I think. Is it her great-grandmother? I think it's her great-grandmother. To me, it helped keep the characters separated. It kept them defined and unique, and I enjoyed it. I liked it. If that is something that would bother you, if you think that's completely unnecessary, I guess maybe be aware of that too. But I quite enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. And I am going to be looking for more from this author. I think she has written a couple of other things that I have on like my to read or TBR list, so I'm excited about that. So those are my 4 books: The Stranger, Elektra, Mythos, and A Tale for the Time Being. I did not get nearly as much reading done as I was hoping. I had started 3 other books that I did not finish. I had started Legends and Lattes, A Canticle for Leibowitz, and Virginia Woolf. Oh, you know what? Actually, I also read, I forgot because I didn't have this in my Goodreads. Yay, I read 5 books. Okay, so my first manga in a very long time and my second manga overall ever that I've read, and it was A Silent Voice by Yoshitoki Oima. This, let me think. I'm gonna say 4 stars. I really liked the premise of this. It talks about bullying and enduring bullying from the perspective of, obviously it's manga, so it's set in Japan. So the blurb is, Shoya is a bully. When Shoko, a girl who can't hear, enters his elementary school class, she becomes his favorite target, and Shoya and his friends goad each other into devising new tortures for her. But the children's cruelty goes too far. Shoko is forced to leave the school, and Shoya ends up shouldering all the blame. 6 years later, the two meet again. Can Shoya make up for his past mistakes, or is it too late? So a few things about this interested me. I like to see explorations of bullying, and I think it's really interesting bullying in different cultures and how that presents and how it's handled by society at large and by school administrations, even by the law. And so I was definitely excited about this. I was excited to see the perspective. I think the biggest thing I was excited about is, can Shoya make up for his past mistakes, or is it too late? So the idea that a bully can turn around and actually want to make up for the torment that they have brought onto another person, I was happy about that, because some of the other ones that I've seen people talk about recently, I forget I can't think of the name of it, but Ashley from Bookish Realm had talked about it in one of her more recent videos, where it was a manga set in Japan, and the girl was the bully in the scenario, and it was kind of that like very American elementary school thing where, oh, if a boy's picking on you, it means he likes you. And so it was actually a romance where the female bully just like pretends that she also isn't a bully, and that there should be like a bully to lovers, enemies to lovers kind of romance. And the way that Ashley talks about how the story developed, that it was very disappointing because it really did not have a discussion on bullying. It glossed over a lot of things, and it kind of reinforces that idea, well, if they pick on you, then they like you, and that that's perfectly acceptable, and that is how you should be conditioned to, you know, if somebody is treating me poorly, it's okay kind of thing. So I'm very wary about things like that, which is why I really enjoyed this. I really like the art style, and I appreciated how the table is flipped. The tables have turned. How the turntables. So by the end of this, Shoya is a somewhat popular kid, but he is known to be kind of not necessarily like a mean bully, but somebody who kind of teases everybody and is just kind of like the renegade kid. But yeah, when Shoko comes in, he definitely does target her because of her disability. And it's interesting because it brings up that he is not the only bully throughout this. He is just the one who is most overt about it. And how everybody else just kind of skates by because they're not outright bullying her, but they are doing it behind her back. And it's very well done. And so then at the end of volume 1, and I did actually buy volume 2 because I really enjoyed this so much. At the end of volume 1, when she leaves for another school, Shoya is now the outcast. Everybody is like, you're mean, you're a horrible person, we don't want to be around you. And so now the bully becomes the bullied. So literally everybody in the class that he thought he was friends with, or at least, you know, on good terms with, now actively bullies him in exchange. And I feel like that dynamic will probably be explored too. I don't know for sure, but I feel like it will, because these people who originally they were all bullying from the background are now out and actively bullying him because they have the excuse of, well, he was shown to be a bully, it's okay now to treat him like garbage. It's a really interesting twist I did not expect, and I'm very, very glad that it is willing to take that on. You know, there's the turn the other cheek, there's the if you just ignore a bully, they'll leave you alone eventually, they'll get bored of you. There's the punch them in the nose and stand up for yourself, and then they'll leave you alone. There's all these different ways that, you know, people give advice to kids who are going through bullying. And I think it's really interesting to kind of see some of that, you know, played out in here. And I just really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, it was super, super quick. This is part of the reason I don't like to read mangas, because if I'm going to spend the same amount of money on this as I am a book, like a novel, I'm going to finish this in 20 minutes versus a book this size that will take me a couple weeks. So I'm having a hard time figuring out if I want to continue to purchase these, because it feels like I'll end up spending a lot of money on a very, very quick read, even though I'm quite enjoying it. So I don't know, I might have to see if maybe my library has copies, but I did thoroughly enjoy this. 4 stars for me. I appreciated the art style, which I can be quite fussy about, but I actually thought that this was pretty well done. It's a style that I quite jive with, the sad girl. I just think it's a really, really good, really good art style for me personally. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to the next one, which I think is when they meet again when they're in high school. So yay, 5 books total. All right, so that's it for me. Let me know down in the comments below if you've read any of these, what you thought of them, and if not, do any of these sound interesting to you? And let me know what you read for July. So thank you so much for watching. I will see you in my next one. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, and happy reading. Bye.